Hi, my name's Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. In this interview, I got to sit down with Dan Silivestru, and we got to speak about things like employee engagement and why that's so important for having successful software teams. Now, I've known Dan for many years now. Surprisingly, time really flies, but I know him back from my time in Kitchener Waterloo, and there's a lot of tech startups in the area. And Dan is one of those tech startup founders. He's been successful having startups and exiting as well. Dan's current company is called Chocolate Soup, and it focuses entirely around employee engagement and retention. Dan, having run successful companies, truly understands the value of this and is channeling all of that through what they're doing at Chocolate Soup. So I think that you're really going to enjoy this conversation, and there's a ton to be gained from having a high level of engagement in your software engineering team. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, Dan, if you want to kick us off and head in that direction for how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I got started as a software developer before I knew that was an actual career path. Like, I
Okay.
literally did not realize that people got paid to write software. I just thought it was just this cool thing that you do. Now, you have to, this is way back in the kind of mid to late 1990s, right? So, about 95, 96, I really got interested in using software for actually getting stuff done. I was actually at University of Waterloo. I was doing a physics degree, and we had a course called computational physics, where it's like literally like solve physics problems but by writing code. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, this is useful. This is kind of cool. But never thought that that would be an actual career. And then, yeah, at some point I ended up taking a break from school to work so I can make money so I can go back to school. And that's when a buddy of mine actually got hired as a software engineer in that company's IT department. And he explained to me what he did. And I was like, oh, well, I'd rather do that than work in a call center. This sounds like a lot more fun. And so my journey was basically a kind of realizing, oh, software development is a career. I later realized that it's also a very good path towards entrepreneurship and building your own company. But at the time, I had no real experience, no degree. So I ended up I lucked out. The VP at that organization was basically, well, here's a big manual on how to code on the IBM AS400, which is a mid-range, you know, frame. Basically, it's not one of the big systems, but big enough.
Sure.
Everything was written in like RPG 3 and some case tools. Yeah, so I spent 3 weeks basically on my lunch and after work with this book, and I guess I was eager enough that they offered me a position, and that's how I got into software development as a career. And about 3 months into it is when the light bulb really went off in my head. I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, this is fantastic!" Like, it's kind of instant gratification in that you write a few lines of code and you see the end result on a screen, and then you promote that, and the user starts using it, and everyone gets more efficient, and it's super
Right.
cool. And like, oh wow, I did that. Whereas all other careers that I could think of, in like individual contributions don't seem to have quite as big of an impact, right?
Right.
And so after 3 months or so, I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a full year before I go back to school. Because I was like, you typically get a year to year and a half off. Like you can pause it before you can go back and finish your degree. So I was like, I'm
Because
going
you
to
were
wait.
just trying to make some money in between still at this point, right?
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I just need to pay for the next 2 years of university, right? And so so anyway, I really liked it. So I decided I'm going to take a full year now, see how this goes, see where it goes, and if I still like it as much, and if this can be a career,
Right.
and if not having a degree kind of puts me at risk in any way. And so yeah, did that for a year, and then decided to stick with it. So officially dropped out of university
Well,
and just kept going as a software developer. So this was right around 1999, give or take. So the internet's already an established thing. Right, we could all see that that's where things were going, and so then I started learning web, as kind of moving away from the old mid-range,
sure.
mainframe kind of world, and the green screen development that we were doing at the time, and trying to kind of understand like how the web works, and yeah, that's kind of what launched my software career from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's super cool to hear. And I know like we know each other from before this, but I didn't realize like from your schooling path that didn't know physics was in there. So that was interesting to hear. And then yeah, I didn't realize that you dropped out and then really like just started pursuing software. And this is you
Mhm.
obviously had a successful career out of this, which is really cool. I think that's helpful for people to hear that
I think,
it's not
yeah, I think it's one of the few careers where you can legitimately be self-taught.
Before we move on, this is just a quick reminder that I do have a course on C# refactoring available on DomeTrain. Refactoring is one of the most critical skills that you can learn as a software engineer, and this helps you continue to build upon applications that already exist, making sure that they can scale and have extensibility. I walk you through a bunch of various techniques and give you some examples that we walk through together to see how we can apply these techniques to refactor the code. Check out the pinned comment and the links in the description to get this course. Now back to the video.
Like, I would not want to go to a self-taught doctor, for example,
Right.
but 100% be a self-taught software engineer. All the resources are out there. There were a lot fewer resources back in my day because the internet was still kind of in its infancy. Everything, it was just hard to find that kind of information. Not a whole lot of it was actually online because people hadn't written and published it in
Sure.
that format. So I literally had stacks of dev books, right, that I would read and learn through. And I've obviously like relying on my more seasoned colleagues on, questions on how do we do this and how do we do that.
Right.
But yeah, like, I mean, I remember writing the first interface kind of, at least at our company, between like web services and the AS400, and getting essentially web requests to generate actual insurance policies behind the scenes. And it was such a foreign concept at the time that I ended up actually having to write. I wrote an article and published it, and back in the day, they actually paid you for that. And yeah, so published that because that's how little information was out there. And today you've got courses everywhere, and a quick Google on how do I do X, and you get thousands and thousands of responses, right? Not to mention Stack Overflow. And now with AI, like, you can actually upload your code and be like, so what's wrong with this? And
Right.
AI is going to do a pretty decent job of telling you, or getting you set up, right? So just some of the hardest things I think for a lot of new developers is you're staring at a blank IDE. And like,
What do I
great,
do here?
where do I start? So that's where like generative AI can actually help provide you with scaffolding, and you can ask it questions. And it's not going to be 100% right, but it's a
Sure.
great way to get started. That kind of stuff just did not exist, right? When you and I were learning.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
Yeah,
I think
it's
there's a lot.
incredible.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
amazing.
I can't imagine for myself personally. Like, I think I probably would have been very stuck as a software developer if my primary and arguably almost only resource was like books to go through. I'm capable of reading. I just don't enjoy the process of reading books, and then trying to, I don't know, like to almost action or change behavior as a result of a book. I've always found that that's not like a way
Mhm.
that I learn effectively.
Yeah, books are also. I mean, maybe I'm dating myself, but I mean, I my first lines of code were basic on a Commodore 64, and I remember like buying the old like Byte magazine, and I forget what the name, and they had like code snippets in them
Right.
to get stuff done, and you would literally just copy right off of the page and type it in, copy,
Right.
transcribe it as it were, and it'd be like, oh, I wonder what this does now, right? So that's kind of how I first learned to code some of this, and reading books about software development, same thing. You're out there, it's written on paper. It's so much easier when you just cut and paste something off the internet, but just that option just wasn't there at the time, right?
Yeah, I think you use the phrase like instant gratification, right? I think if I had to have a book, try to transcribe things and have a that feedback loop with strictly a book to try and learn those things, it would have, I don't know if I would have had the tighter feedback loop that I need to feel like I'm making progress. And being able to, I mean, obviously AI is relatively new for us to be able to lean into, but being able to search for things on the internet and kind of just like, I don't know, like almost like pull what I need from the internet and just kind of have that, for me was very helpful. But now it's certainly a different world where you can literally talk to an LLM and just say like, to your point, I have a blank IDE. Like, where do I start? Right. That's like a fascinating concept.
Yeah, it is, and I played around with it actually because like I wanted to, and this is back in I think the 3.0 days, right, of GPT. But I was just like, hey, like what can you do coding
Right.
wise? So I actually had it help me just build a little game, right?
Sure.
It's a little tank that will shoot a thing at an alien spacecraft, and if it hits it, it blows up. And I actually, and not only did it help me with the code, it helped me actually create the assets, figure out where the assets are from. I was like, oh, can
Cool.
you draw me a picture of a tank? It's like, well, I can't do pictures. I'm like, okay, but can you code an SVG that represents a tank? And it goes, oh yeah, sure,
Oh,
here you go. I was like, okay, cool. So but just The progress that I managed to make with it, and have it like, okay, you kind of need to know some
Sure.
coding because obviously its code didn't work. I'm sure it's a lot better now. But I was super impressed by how far I could get in like literally like 2 to 3 hours of just kind of noodling with it, right?
Right.
So if you're looking to learn to code, and get into it, I mean, this isn't an option that just didn't exist for you and I when we got started, but I think it's so powerful now for anyone, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe I'll get your perspective on this. I think I won't bias you with mine first, I guess. But from the perspective of sort of value of software engineering skills, kind of getting into the industry now, right? Because I think for a lot of people, they're seeing AI come about and they're starting to question, like, what does my career look like if I want to head in this direction? Like, I don't personally, I don't remember people even asking this ever before where it's like, hey, like, is there a career in software development? It was just like, hey, like, that's for smart techie people, like, if you want to do well, like, you head in this direction. But I feel like now people are starting to go, should I even bother going into this industry because of things like AI? Do you have a kind of I don't mean to put you on the spot for it, but some thoughts around what that looks like now?
uh you know, it's tough, and it's not like putting me. I don't think anyone truly, if they say they have an answer to it and they're adamant about it, I'm not 100% sure I would trust them or believe them. I think that for now, I look at it as assistive and as a way of like really cutting down the amount of time that you
Mhm.
need specifically to like write like boilerplate type code, right?
Yep.
Simple features, all that kind of stuff, helping you get somewhere faster. I'm not sure that it's quite there yet, and maybe it will be at some point. But I find some of the software engineering things that really make humans valuable is the infrastructure behind the code, right? And the performance optimizations and like really understanding like how the systems work rather than, I mean, code is just logic. It's a whole bunch of if this then that, right? And maybe a couple of loops in there, right? But ultimately, like that's what software is to me. It's always been it's just a logical path that you kind of navigate. So if the user does this, okay, then we do that, and more or less. So I think for the kind of simplistic tasks, I think AI can just help you get there like 10 times faster,
Right.
basically. But I'm not sure that an AI is quite at a point where you can describe a problem and it comes up with a solution, right? You can describe a process and it can help you code it. But just like all computers, right? Like, when someone goes like, well, why is my software doing this? I'm like, well, because you told it to somewhere
Right.
in your code, right? The machine doesn't, there's no ghost in the machine just yet, right? But I think it's the same with an AI. It'll do its very best to interpret it based on the LLM and try and generate code that performs a particular task. But I'm not sure it's quite at the point where you can feed it a transcription of a meeting between a process owner and a developer and have it go, okay, cool, I know exactly what to code now to solve this business problem, right? That's
Yeah.
just my opinion. Could it change? 100%. LLMs have come a very long way just in the last like 18 months. So
Yep. No,
yeah,
that's
I
it's
still think that
true.
there's careers to be had in dev spaces.
Cool.
And at the end of the day, someone still has to code these LLMs and someone still has to help improve that process as well, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's thanks for that. I think that resonates with me. I've had some conversations with folks where the idea is kind of like, well, hey, look, like if we can start piecing things together that come out of the LLMs, like what job does the software developer have anymore? And so part of me sees that, yeah, when you're getting like I've had a couple of individuals I've talked with have built working software, like you mentioned, that building a game, right? And I've seen the same type of thing where people asking LLMs for the parts and they're able to glue it together. But then I'm going, yeah, like you're still gluing it together, right? Or when things don't work, like how do you, like, what do you do? Like, yeah, okay, you might be able to talk to the LLM to kind of get your way out of it, but you still have to be able to have the conversation with it to be able to navigate it. So I've always kind of taken the stance that, I mean, so far, like you said, things continue to change. But having knowledge about software development, software engineering, like how things work, and having a deeper understanding can be a huge asset when you're using LLMs and trying to build things with them. I still see them, like you said, as right now, especially as things that enhance your productivity, especially boilerplate code, or being able to, like, I've been using it for like regular expressions and generating SQL queries. Can I do both of those things? Yep, 100%. Do I love doing them? No.
I think regex has always been on the very bottom of things that I enjoyed to do.
Yep.
Just putting it out there. So if I could be like, I need the regex that would exclude this, but let me know when that is, and it just generates it. I'd be like, fantastic, this is great. I'll
Yep.
use that. Yeah,
Between that and SQL, like, I like, my thing is I like understanding that I have access to those things and being able to tweak them and tune them, but I don't like sitting there and writing SQL. I don't like writing regular expressions, but I just like the accessibility and kind of owning that. Like, when they're too abstracted from me, then I'm like, oh crap, what if some situation comes up and I need to tune it? But LLMs, like, with those two things in particular, they've generated results where I go, oh, like, maybe I didn't think about it that way. So, like, interesting. Now let me play around with it a little bit more and see, like, why did it do it that way?
right. Yeah, exactly. So no, I don't think the role of a software developer is going away anytime soon. So
Yeah.
that would be my. It's just like construction, right? Like you see more and more like prefab modular components, right? When they're building, high rises or even houses now, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't negate the need for actual construction workers and plumbers and electricians that know what they're doing to piece all of these things together, right? I think it's kind of very similar to that.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That makes sense. But yeah, so thanks for sharing that. I think it's kind of probably top of mind for a lot of people. So it's kind of cool to hear
Well,
different
that's just my opinion.
perspectives. Yeah, no, it's carved in stone now. This is the rule. No, that's awesome. So Dan, I'm curious as well. So you gave us a little bit of background for your software engineering journey, but entrepreneurship is huge for you, and I'm curious. Like, did you know that that was always a direction you wanted to go in, or did something happen along the way where you said, like, I think I need to be doing this?
That's definitely the latter.
Okay.
So I mean, I grew up with two very well-educated parents. They're both engineers. I mean, I'm born in Romania during communism, so that back then, like people's mentalities were, you go to school, the state gives you a job, or or if not, then you get a job and you do that job, and then eventually you retire, and then that's it, right? And so entrepreneurship was never ran within my immediate family. My uncle was an entrepreneur and a good one, started a construction company back in Israel and did quite well. And so it was right there adjacent. So I knew it was possible, right? Like
Okay.
anybody could theoretically start a company. But no, I mean, I spent the first 12, 13 years of my career in corporate. I spent the first 8.5 years working for an insurance company, and then another year and a half working for a financial institution, and then that's when I first left.
Okay.
So that was like a good, basically 10 years in, and I ended up going working for a startup. And by startup, I mean it was the founder and myself and maybe one other part timer. And unfortunately, they ran out of money within the first 6 months. So that's kind of when I got introduced to the whole. Well, not all startups are cool and successful, right? And so to make up for that, I ended up taking a contract. And in Toronto, I actually ended up building country music television's like newest website with
Oh,
social.
cool.
There's an actual like social network aspect to it that we all built into it. So that was almost a year-long project. And at the end of that, I was like, oh, hold on. Like I worked for myself as a
Right.
contractor, more than pay all the bills. This is really great. The commute was killing me. So I came back into town and worked for a local, a more mature startup. So there
Yep.
was about 40 people in it, kind of well-funded and well-financed at the time. And did that for about a year and a bit. Um, when I That's when I realized I was I'm back in corporate. Something is nagging. I don't like it. I don't know what it is, but
Mm.
it. I just you
You
see
can sense
decisions
it.
being made, like, and I'm not criticizing anybody in those
Sure.
companies. But you see decisions being made that maybe you don't agree with, or maybe you disagree with, but you're like, but you have zero control
Right.
over them unless you make it to like a senior VP or C-suite within those kind of companies. Um, I mean, that's a great way to get to a point where you can make a change, but that is I will admit, probably a 20-year journey, right,
Sure.
before you get to that position. And I just started feeling uncomfortable. And got a call from a connection of mine that happened to be in the UK, looking for help. They were launching a new platform. So a lot of people, hopefully in this podcast, are somewhat still familiar with PhoneGap, Cordova from back in the day. But if you're not, then it was essentially a way to write mobile applications using 100% web text with JavaScript, HTML, then package it within a native container and then publish it to any of the actual app stores.
Cool.
So it was a way to kind of more or less write the concept was write the app once, deploy it to any mobile platform without having to deal with all the different native languages that they all supported. So it's a super early days of that. And at the time, I think they called them mobile widgets. That folks had a big project with one of the telcos in the UK. Reached out and he's like, "Man, can you help me build these mobile widgets? Like, we committed to building X number of them, and like can't find anybody that knows anything about them. Like, can you do it?" I was like, "Yeah, 100%, we can do it." Um, so decided to start a company, basically a consulting company, to do exactly that. And yeah, I remember hanging up the phone, turning to my wife, who then became my business partner as well, and saying, "I have no idea what a mobile widget is, but we just committed to building 6 of them." So, but I was like, "It's code. How hard can it be? I mean, it's code, right? Like, there's no magic there, right?"
Like you said, at the end of the day, it's going to be if statements and loops at some level, right? So as long as you
Exactly.
can break down the
Exactly.
problem.
And so what we did there, and this is how I kind of accidentally fell into entrepreneurship. When I realized that, oh, this is a way to use web tech that everybody knows how to code to deploy to pretty much any mobile platform, as long as the someone builds that native container and plumbs the API calls between your web interface and the native components on the phone.
Right.
Like that's the only unifying thing at the time, and I would probably say maybe even now, the only unifying thing between all of these mobile platforms was a browser. Like, that was the only thing that they had in common that had to run JavaScript the way JavaScript has to run. So
Right.
there was that. And so I was like, I think this is the future of mobile dev, at least to a certain extent. So I gave my 2 months notice to my employer. They were super supportive, and they found out that I'm leaving to start my own company because they're entrepreneurs themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we got into it. We were just going to be a consulting company, and then we ended up. The tooling was terrible,
Okay.
because you're building in a web frame, but all the tooling was for all the native code. So as soon as something went wrong in the web frame, you got a blank screen, and you're like, "Well, I don't know what
What
went
now?
wrong." And so, like, literally, we got back to like print statements, like, console log, I got this far. And then you're like, "Okay, well, the problem is after this," if it actually displayed. And that's when, I was put under a bit of pressure. My partner at the time was actually still in school at university, and he needed to take a break from this consulting thing to do his like final year project. And he's like, "I need to solve a real world problem using code." I'm thinking of maybe doing, I forget what he was trying to build. Like, look, we have a real world problem right in front of us. Like,
Right.
we,
Yeah.
we can't code this stuff, because we can't debug it and we can't test it. So my idea was like, why don't we build an in the browser mobile device emulator so that essentially we can fake all of the API calls and return mock data back, so that as you're running your mobile app inside a browser, the app actually thinks it's sitting on top of an actual cell phone, and you have accelerometer and you have GPS and notifications and anything else that was provided through that API layer.
Right.
Anyway, so we built it for ourselves so we could actually be more productive. Then someone in the UK found out that we had this tool internally, and they were like, "Listen, I have this consultant that's charging me like 100 British pounds an hour. He's been working on this bug for 2 days now, can't figure it out. We just send you the code, and let's just, like, maybe your tool can figure it out." So they did. Not only did we find a problem, we fixed it, all within 20 minutes of
Oh
getting
wow.
the code, right? Because you could see it. Like, you could just debug it right in the browser, right? Like, all the wonderful web dev tooling that's built right into our browser all of a sudden was, like, there and available to us.
Right.
So it wasn't like magic. It was just the fact that we could see what was happening, whereas the other consultant didn't have the tooling to actually see what was going on in their JavaScript code. And so we demoed that, and one of our advisors basically was like, "What are you guys doing consulting like this? The world needs this. Like, what? Turn this into it's a product already. Like,
Right.
why don't you go ahead and turn it into a real product, and then build your company around that?" So, yeah. So then we went from making cash to burning cash, and I don't know if your audience are entrepreneurs out there, but that comes with all the roller coasters. And long story short, it was a success. We ended up getting acquired by BlackBerry, and added into their dev kind of tooling. And as part of that, we actually convinced them to open source the product. And
That's awesome.
just before we ended up leaving, BlackBerry actually convinced them to donate the project to the Apache Foundation. And that then kind of decoupled BlackBerry from it and allowed a whole bunch of other organizations to take this tool and incorporate it into their IDEs and whatnot. So like Intel and Microsoft both ended up using it, which was really great. So I mean, at the end of the day, we built something that several million people used. So that was satisfying. So anyways, that's how I got into entrepreneurship. And after that stint, being with BlackBerry for 2 years, and back into the very much corporate environment is
Right.
when I was positive I would never go back to a real job, if you want to call
Yeah,
it that.
it kept pulling you back, right? And you kept going, "Hey, this doesn't feel like the thing I want," so you have to go do
Yeah,
something else.
exactly. So I joke around a lot, but I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur because I think I'm mostly just unemployable. So that's just how I do it.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear that like something that you built came out of like this like real problem that you had, and that like other people have this problem, right? And starting to realize like, hey, like if we make this a thing that other people can take advantage of, then that's your opportunity. But I mean,
Right. And I
it's
think that this is why I recommend to almost all entrepreneurs or people that are thinking that at some point they want to own their own company and run their own business is don't shy away from spending the first 5 or 10 years of your career at an actual large company. You'll understand how they work, how the people within them make decisions, how they make purchasing decisions. Because let's face
Mhm.
it, if you're going to start your own company, you got to figure out how to sell to these folks. And if you've never worked in that environment, then you don't really know what they're looking for. You
Right.
don't. You need to understand what kind of problems they're trying to solve for and how they go about doing the internal calculus to say, yeah, this is something I'm willing to spend money on. And the other thing I would recommend is I think stories like Twitter are few and far between where you kind of come up with a concept that you think is kind of cool and you build it, but there's no real use case for it and
Sure.
then it becomes a big success. I think in most cases, you find a problem that ideally you have that's been nagging at you and that's hopefully pretty big, and then you solve it. And if you've solved it for yourself really well, odds are there's an audience out there that's having the exact same challenges that you're having, and now you potentially have a product that you can bring to market and someone to buy it, right?
Right.
So, like our third company, we didn't really do that. We just thought it was a cool concept, right? So that was BitHound, and we basically wrote code that analyzed other people's code. We were kind of ahead of the mark on that one because people were still kind of hesitant to have their code hosted in the cloud,
Right.
right? Sneak, for example, that's out there right now, is doing a fantastic job, and it's basically kind of more than what we did because they started on the security front. But so obviously there's a market for it. Not for us. And then, yeah, what we're doing right now is very much solving a real problem for companies, and we it's going to be 8 years in 4 days from now that we've been at it. So
Right. And you guys, what? So for and thanks for the whole entrepreneur like focus. I think that's very valuable information. So you guys are focused on what now in your entrepreneurship?
so it's funny. So Chocolate Soup, that's our current company. We're in the employee appreciation and recognition space. So, we help organizations make sure that their employees feel truly valued and cared for. And we decided to not do it with software. I mean, obviously, we're software backed and, we're
Sure.
technology enabled, but we do that with physical gifting. So we provide physical gifts for your employees for those milestones that are most important to your employees, not to you. So obviously work anniversary, important to both, but we also do like employees' birthdays, significant others' birthdays, children's birthdays, and believe it or not, we do pet birthdays too because people love their fur babies.
That's right.
So all of that through Physical gifts that we curate ourselves. So it's not the catalog based approach, right? Which feels super impersonal. Every one of our gifts comes with a handwritten personalized card wishing that person a happy anniversary or a happy birthday. And then we pair all of that up with, I just happen to have one of these. This is not,
Cool.
but we do custom Lego
Oh,
figurines,
awesome.
right? That represent each individual person. They can customize themselves. Huge selection of heads, hats, hairs, and like, they get a year for every brick. They get their name on a thing. This just happens to be
That's
like
so
have three
cool.
companies on a this way on on bricks, just to show the different formats, and then
Yeah, yeah.
custom bricks for like special milestones, awards, and the like, right? But chocolate soup, actually, back to that entrepreneurial point, chocolate soup was 100% born out of my last company's failure. So the last company that we had, we ended up having to wind it up because there was no sales weren't where they needed to be. There was no more avenue to funding, and we gave everyone 3 months notice and said, hey, look, we're out of cash in 3 months. Like, the founders will stick around and try and like hopefully get the market to catch up,
Sure.
but there won't be funds for salaries. So 3 months, and we gave everybody what we told everyone was like, point to any company that you want to go work for, and we'll move mountains to get you in there. We had phenomenal talent. We knew we'd have no problems getting them placed where they wanted to go, and we were super surprised when they all stuck around till the very last paycheck, and then they
Wow.
were like, "Okay, now you can help me find a job." I'm like, okay, I will, 100%. But tell me why you waited till now and you spent the last 3 months, like literally trying to automate yourself out of a job so the founders can keep this company
Right.
going.
Yeah.
And they said, well, listen, you guys have always taken such amazing care of us and cared about us and our families. How could we let you down? And I was like, turn around to my wife. And it's like, what did we do? And, she was like, well, I knew all their birthdays. I knew their kids' birthdays. There was always something there for them. I knew their spouses and what they liked. And there was, again, stuff for them all the time. If they had pets, we took care of that as well. And we just cared about them as people first, employees second. And that's when kind of the initial inkling kind of came to be. And this was all my wife. I just kept saying no, no, no until we came up with a business plan or a business model that I thought would work and scale. But the question was, why don't other companies do this for their employees, right? You come home with a gift from your employer for your kid on your kid's birthday, that sends an amazing message, right? That
Yeah.
tells your significant other and your kid that your company cares about you, understands that you have a kid at home, and cares enough that they're going to send something so that you can better celebrate their
Sure.
birthday, right? And it has a tremendous impact on retention, on productivity, all of that. So we're like, well, why don't people do that? And I'm like, well, it's a lot of work. Let's face it. So that's when I was like, oh, could we automate it? I mean, we firsthand saw the impact of doing this right. Could we turn this into a service where we do all the heavy lifting, company gets all the benefits and advantages, but they don't have to have a full-time employee for every 100 people just to make this work,
Right.
right? And now, once COVID hit and work remote became really a staple for a lot of organizations, that's like, well, if you have 200 people, are you shipping 200 things to 200 different places? And if you want to do birthdays as well, that's 400 things. And if you
Hmm.
want to do significant others and kids, and now it's 600 things, right? And let's face it, your people and culture leadership and administrators are busy enough doing the hard cultural stuff. So yeah, so that's how that started in 2016. September, and we onboarded our first 5 customers in January 2017, and it's been going ever since.
That's awesome. But it's true. It truly is like a really fascinating space, right? Because we hear it all the time, like how important like culture is, and we hear it. And I don't know. I feel like sometimes, depending on your role and like how involved you like to get into these types of things, but I feel like a lot of people hear it and they go, "Okay, that's nice," but like I got features to deliver, I got bugs to fix, and at the end of the day, my employee doesn't care about me. So like, let me just get my paycheck, and it almost just feels like we hear this stuff, but
Right.
there's not it doesn't get backed up or something like that.
And it's difficult, right? Because as leadership, regardless whether you're a team lead or you're senior VP, right, you have deliverables and you have things you have to take care
Sure.
of, and there's strategic stuff, but then the day-to-day tactical stuff just fills up your day, right? How many of us like look at emails or even respond to them, even in the evenings, just because there's a lot on our plates, right? So layering on top of that, oh, now I have to remember when people's birthdays are, or anniversaries. I mean, yeah, I get a notification in my HRIS, but am I going to do anything about it?
Sure.
Or if or one manager goes above and beyond, and another one doesn't. So now you don't have a consistent level of recognition, appreciation throughout your company, right? And we see that all the time. So
Hmm.
that's where we started our company the way that we did, is just to say, well, yeah, no, you keep doing the stuff that you need to be doing. This is literally a problem that you can fix by putting down a credit card and sending us your employee information. And again, there's a lot of automation out there already, so it's not like someone has to, they just send us a report from their HRIS. So it becomes a lot easier. But I think, one of the things I've noticed, even in my career in tech, is and I don't want to necessarily generalize, but within
Sure.
software development kind of teams, I find appreciation recognition is lower on the list than in other departments. And I don't exactly know why, but it could just be that people like put their headphones on and they're sitting there and they want to be coding, and that's fine. But people are people, and they still very much appreciate being recognized and appreciated, both for the work that they do and just for the milestones that they hit as people. And so, um, you don't have to sign up to Chocolate Soup, but if you pay attention to what your employees are doing, it goes a long way. If you just come out of nowhere and tap them on the shoulder and go, "Hey, listen, I saw that thing you did yesterday. That's amazing. Like, that was awesome. Great job. Thanks so much for fixing that bug that's been nagging us for weeks." Whatever it might be that employee did, if they did a good job, just a pat on the back goes a very long way, right? Handwritten sticky note on their desk, even saying, "Hey, thanks so much for X."
Right.
Again, goes a very long way, and it shows the employee that you're paying attention to them, right? So those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping, like through Chocolate Soup and beyond, we can help affect and kind of shift, not just in the tech industry, but across all industries. But when someone feels like, I guess, seen, valued, people recognize them as a person. Mondays don't suck as much anymore. Like you don't mind going to the office. Like, I love coming to the office on a Monday, right? Like, my job is making people happy, right? So like there's a kind of a purpose here beyond just running a company, and I think that that's also a key to being successful as an entrepreneur. Is uh, I really hope whoever starts a company is pursuing something they're passionate about, because
Right.
the highs are great, but the lows are pretty low as well. And if the passion isn't there for what you're trying to bring to the world, then the lows hit a lot harder, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a really good way to frame it, and I think that you said something that I really resonate with. But you said coming in on a Monday, right? Like, you're excited to do it. You have a mission there. It makes you happy because you're making other people happy. I I feel like a lot of people, unfortunately, I feel like it's an overwhelming majority of people have not worked in places where they're like, hell yeah, I like going to work. It's just kind of like, I got to do this because I need the paycheck. But I've been fortunate enough early on in my career, I got to work somewhere where I was like, hell yeah. Like, I don't care if it's a Monday, if it's a Saturday, a Sunday. Like, I like doing the work that I'm doing. I like the people
Mhm.
I work with. I like the mission we have. Leadership is awesome. Like, everything about it is good. Like, I don't I it was different for me because I just felt like everything about this is awesome. Why do people complain about working?
Right. Well, that just sit there. You have to remember, though, I think this is a saying from a long, long time ago, but as most people quit their manager, not their job,
Right.
which again should tell folks that it's the people that make the workplace a fun place to go
Right.
to. Like, we have customers across pretty much every industry, everything from like insurance to construction to manufacturing, obviously tech, but everywhere the resounding thing is, I have good people, I want to retain them, and I want to make sure that they understand that they're super valuable to us. And if you feel that way as an employee, you don't mind showing up and doing your best, right?
Yeah.
So it's less the job, I think. It's more the people and the leadership that set up that environment that makes people want to come to work and thrive. And let's face it, some of us spend more time at work than we do with our loved ones, right? I'm not counting the time when we sleep, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
8 hours at work, 8 hours at home, if you're lucky, minus like all the errands and stuff that you do and you run around when you're not around your family, and then 8 hours of sleep if you're lucky. Maybe 6 or 5 if you're like me, but that's a different story. And so you want to create the most healthy and fun environment. And not to go on too much of a segue here, but I think the pandemic was a great kind of eye opener, especially for a lot of tech companies, when they finally realized that a ping pong table and a beer keg does not culture make, because those disappeared overnight. And then they realized that there was no foundation for their culture sitting on. And then they had to do a lot of extra work. Whereas companies like the Magnet Forensic that you used to work for and others that I've worked for in the past had less trouble during the transition, because they had already put in a lot of work to make sure that they help people build solid relationships with their coworkers, and
Right.
they put that kind of environment in place where you know people had a very strong sense of belonging, better interpersonal bonds. And so when all of a sudden you had to talk to someone over Zoom versus in person, I was like, well, that's fine. We
Sure.
keep
Yeah.
that going, right?
Whatever.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that's gonna what I preach about these days is it's less the work, it's more the management, the leadership, really putting people front and center, and that's why I absolutely despise the term HR, human resources. I mean, just think about what that means.
Yeah.
People and culture, leadership, yes, that shows me where your focus is. Human resources, I picture a factory in the late 1800s with a whole bunch of peons, just like working on a cog in a machine, right? So
Right.
yeah, there.
No, that's it's awesome. Yeah, the focus on people. So I just wanted to, on the magnet forensics front, I wanted to mention one of the things that I used to say when I would talk with like the founder Jad. Like he had such a great culture, not just him obviously, but
Mhm.
part of what him and Adam had set up in that company, I felt like was such a great culture that I remember saying to Jad on multiple occasions, because I was there since right near the beginning, and things aren't always easy, especially in the beginning. And I remember saying like, I feel like it doesn't, like, obviously the mission we had was great, like being able to help with forensics and helping law enforcement. That was great. But I had always said, like, based on the people, I said, it doesn't matter what we're building. I said, this is always a weird example, but I stuck to it. I said, we could switch to going to be a cheese grater factory. We go make cheese graters now. It's not even software. But I said, the fact that we could all work together, I said, that's enough for me, right? Like, it doesn't matter what we're actually building, it's the people. Obviously, the forensic part on top of that was just the cherry on top, but it's the
Yeah.
people.
Well, it's always good when you can really get behind the mission of the organization that you work for, right? Like if it resonates,
Right.
because that obviously helps, right? Like, oh, well, I have a legitimate, worthwhile purpose, right? But not every job has that. Like, not
Sure.
every company has that kind of impact on the world, the environment, of whatever it is that you're passionate about. But yeah, if you can build that kind of internal culture, that's people centric, makes a huge difference in terms of people like wanting to show up to work and wanting to get stuff done.
Right. And so there's another thing that you mentioned that I thought was kind of funny, because as we talk about recognition, the being able to gift, recognize, especially not just the employee but their family, kids, pets. You had mentioned like the ping pong table kind of thing, and I'm curious if anyone watching or listening when this is live, right? If they go, well, how is the pizza party or the ping pong table? How is that any different? And I'm sure you have a strong opinion about this, but what came to mind for me was like, those are things that you can just do and not care about. Like, it doesn't actually, there's nothing personal. It's not acknowledging an individual. Like, people, you said people want to be seen.
Yes. Yeah. So the ping pong table, the beer keg, the pizza parties, I mean, they are facilitators for getting people together and kind of opening like providing a space essentially
Sure.
where they can be themselves and chat about stuff that's not necessarily work related. And the whole idea behind that, I'm sure, is well, that's going to help build interpersonal relationships and all that kind of good stuff, right? And that's 100% valid. It's just as we've moved into hybrid and remote, and we were going to go that way anyway, just the pandemic, I think, accelerated things about 10, 20
Yep.
years. But, a lot of our customers are like, wow, we were super reluctant to make this move originally. We were forced to, but now all of a sudden we have access to a global talent pool as opposed to just regional, or we would need to open up a physical office somewhere in the old
Right.
traditional way of doing things. So I still think the ping pong table and, like I said, all of those other perks provide a space for that kind of stuff to happen, right?
Sure.
But along with it, you kind of also have to provide, like, I guess, an environment where people feel comfortable using that space and, not being criticized for, well, you're playing ping pong all the time, you're not working. Like, okay, so there's a kind of a balance there as well, right?
Mhm.
Most people are pretty good about self-governing, so that's all good. But I think, um, to a certain extent, you're right. That's kind of the put it in place and forget it. It's just
Yeah.
there. And whereas being active in how you tackle appreciation and recognition, putting whether it's an internal program where you get like an external company to help you, but putting something in place that is there, it's working. I mean, in a way, chocolate soup is also kind of a put it in place and forget it, but it doesn't feel that way to the employees, right?
Sure.
So it's just like it's a way for them to not have to do the heavy lifting to make it happen. Um, but yeah, just we found just recognizing people as people goes a very long way. And I mean, elements of our thing as well is there to help promote those kinds of bolstering of those interpersonal relationships. Like, not to harp on these little folks, but I mean, if you look at my guy, you can tell pretty quickly I enjoy playing golf and drinking beer.
Yeah.
I will admit to your audience, I only do one of those well. I'll let you figure out which one that is. But if one of my colleagues has a bicycle and I'm into cycling, it is going to start a conversation, right? If one of my colleagues is a golfer, and this actually happened, we hired somebody, and the first words out of his mouth when he saw my figurine was like, "Dan, you play golf?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." Anyway, and we ended up playing a few rounds since, and it was a really great way to actually like take our interpersonal relationship up to the next level, and kind of help build some of those stronger bonds. And then, hey, if you're friends with folks, like that's actually one of the best ways to help retain people is help them make a friend at work. You're going to want to collaborate and work with those people more if you already like them and have a connection with them, right? So the productivity goes up. And then, like I said, retention, because why would I want to leave? I like working with my friends, right? So those kinds of things that companies can put in place, and not just companies, but individual leaders within organizations that feel strongly about this. Almost every leader in an organization has a budget for
Mhm.
recognition and appreciation. Use it. It's there for a reason, right?
Yep. No, 100%. And the one thing that was coming to mind, and I guess like it depends on who you are and like so the audience right now, right? There's going to be individuals that they're individual contributors, or perhaps even some folks that are in management or leadership positions listening and watching. But if you are of the management or leadership position, like truly, when's the last time you had a conversation with someone and you just kind of out of the blue, appreciated them for something? Could be very small, and how did you do it? And then
Mhm.
on the flip side, if you're an individual, like when's the last time your manager sent you a message or popped by your desk, however you're set up, and kind of acknowledge something? And I would wager it's you might not even remember the last time, which tells you something, right? Like
Mhm.
there's such an opportunity there. For the folks that can remember it, I can guarantee that the if you were receiving it or if you're the person giving it, whoever received that that message or the manager coming by the desk or whatever, that interaction, you probably felt amazing.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
probably
absolutely.
felt so good from that. And even though it was a small gesture, whatever, like you didn't have to get a stack of cash on your desk or something, but like just being someone recognizing you, making you feel seen,
Right.
feels so good.
100%. And I mean, I tell young leaders, so I've spent quite a bit of time mentoring startups through Communitech locally and on other occasions. But I also, um, one of the things I always do is with my employees in the past, like on Monday, I always ask them how their weekend went. hey, how was your weekend? Did you do anything cool? On Friday, excuse me, I'll ask them if they have any like special plans for the weekends. And if they do, I'll make a mental note so that on Monday I can ask them about that special thing that they went to. Like, oh, they're going to a concert, they're going to go camping. I'm like, so instead of asking, hey, how was your weekend? I'd be like, hey, how'd the camping trip go? Like, how was that? Then they're like, oh, what? He was paying attention on Friday when he asked me. That wasn't just he asked a question just so that he can ask the question and check that off
Not a
his
common
list.
courtesy, like, yeah, check the
Exactly.
box.
Right?
Yeah.
He actually paid attention and then asked about that event on Monday, right? But those are such low level effort things that leaders can be doing and just incorporate into their day to day routine, I guess you'd even call it. Costs you nothing really from an effort perspective, but actually has a really big impact on your team. They
Yeah.
feel like you care about the fact that they went and did something cool on the weekend, and right.
I feel like it's one of those things, and you kind of said it a little bit earlier, but when we have so many things on our plate to do, right? So, and everyone's busy. It's not like just managers or leaders. It's literally every person is so busy all the time with everything going on. So, when you take something that seems as simple as you just said, right? Like you said it out loud, it doesn't cost anything. It literally is just a human interaction, but there's a lot of value in it. And trying to it's almost like trying to make a mental effort to say, okay, I have to go do this when you're just running around trying to do stuff. It almost feels like this extra tax or this hard high effort thing you have to go do, even though truly it's like it's minimal effort. It's just you have to it's almost like you have to form the habit of doing it to just be a normal human with other people. So
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I know that this probably is going to get posted on YouTube as well, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your audience, like, I'd definitely throw something in the comments if there's stuff that you do that you see like works really well. Because I mean, that this is just one guy's opinion, right? But I'm sure your people in the audience, whether you've received a certain kind of recognition or appreciation or something that leadership did that make you go, oh yeah, wow, this was awesome. Like, I can't wait to get back here. Or as a leader, if there's something that you do consistently that you see works really well, yeah, throw, I'd love to read it in the comments. So please throw in the
Yeah.
comments and let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Dan, we have a mutual friend, Kelly, and Kelly is the individual who connected me with you in the first place a few years back now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Kelly taught me early on, because when I started managing, I had only been like in like professional software development for months at the time. It was
Mhm.
a team lead position at the time with like full comp view and a lot of people that directly reported to me. So
Right.
that was management. But she had said, like, basically situational leadership was something that she instilled upon me like immediately. And this idea that, like, number one, people aren't all going to want the same things you do, so you have to think about them differently from yourself. But also, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So just because it works with someone doesn't mean you can just take these concepts and say, okay, cool, it worked for Sally, now it's going to work for Jim, and it's going to work for Susan. Like, you have to understand individuals. And I just wanted to bring this up because I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking through in terms of recognition, there's a human element and there's this individual element. So
Mhm.
um, you need to be like, this is again like an extra tax, I guess, right? But you have to be spending time to understand individuals, understand how they like to be recognized, and navigating these things. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I still feel like it's just being a good human to other people, but
100%.
it's kind of weird that it seems like a tax.
Yeah, yeah, I know people look at it as, oh, now I have to do this. But no, like when you're interacting with your friends and family and whatnot, you genuinely care about
Yeah,
what's going
that's
on
not a
in their
tax.
lives, right? It's not a tax. It's the same with your team, right? And I, give credit to Kelly because she's probably one of the best like people and culture leaders that I know out there. And it's true, like you have to take a lot of things into consideration, not just individual likes and kind of interests, but we're a very multinational country here in Canada. And that comes with cultural differences between people. And, something that resonates for someone might be quite the opposite for somebody else, depending on kind of their culture and where they're from and how they're used to operate. But again, I don't view those as taxes that you have to pay. I think it's like I said, if you know, with your friends, you have to take just as much interest in their lives as you want them to take in yours for them to be a friend. Otherwise, it's
Has
very
to be
kind of,
mutual.
otherwise it's one sided, right? And
Yep.
then it's not really a friendship. So I think it's very similar when it comes to your team that you interact with, pretty much probably more than you do with, well, actually, I know I interact with my coworkers way more than I interact with my friends because I don't hang out with my friends every single day,
Right.
right? So why I think it's a very worthwhile effort to put in.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I just wager that people have not experienced this, right? They haven't experienced being on the side where they do feel seen and appreciated regularly at work, and then the flip side, individuals that are in management leadership positions, they've not experienced like being able to provide that to employees and people that they work with, and seeing the positive impact that that has. It truly is a low effort thing. It's just that you have to be conscious and do the thing. Like you have to go
Mhm.
be a good human with the people you're working with. You spend so much time with them. Like,
That's
why
right.
would you not want that?
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of one of the big things that I advocate for now. Like I said, you don't need to sign up to a software solution or a company
Sure.
like Chocolate Soup to make an impact on your employees, right? Like and a positive one at that. And I think you'll find that it just it makes it even more pleasant for you to then come into the office as a leader. If you have an energized team behind you that knows you care and feels valued and seen, it's just I think leaders would have more fun coming to work, right? Because they'll just have cool people to talk to that actually want to talk to them.
Right,
So
exactly. It's not a situation where you feel like you need to avoid or evade conversations. It's like literally people want to be around you, you want to be around them, but it all starts with, being able to show appreciation, being a human to the other humans that you're working with. So,
that's right. Exactly. Simple as that. So, and that also holds true whether you're a 3-person startup or a 1,000-person like Fortune 500 company. Like at the end of the day, the person across the table from you is still the human.
right.
They don't become less human the larger the organization gets, right? So
Even though it obviously like starts to feel like that, the remoteness of work starts to make things feel like that, where we start to lose that human element. But like it again, it does not have to be that way. So I think that's really critical for people to hear, is just like it goes a long way to have that. um Dan, I wanted to check with you as well, if kind of coming up on the hour here. So if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best place to get in touch with you, and give us a little bit more of a final pitch on Chocolate Soup so people can check it out.
absolutely. So if you want to check us out, chocolatesoup.ca, super easy to get to. If you want to get in touch with me personally, it's very simple. Dan at chocolatesoup.ca will come straight to me. If you have a question that's kind of for the broader team, info at chocolate soup will get you there. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to put a link to it underneath.
Yeah,
Send me a connection request. Just mention the podcast and love to connect and chat about anything. And yeah, as far as Chocolate Soup goes, I mean, if you have employees that you want to make sure feel valued, cared for, you want to increase retention, you want to add a super fun element into how you mark milestones as opposed to having, those little, I don't know what they're, crystal things that go on your
I've
desk
seen some
every
like,
five
yeah.
to 10 years that end up collecting dust. If you want something a little bit more interactive and fun, kind of like, get a hold of us. Again, what we do, and especially with the custom Lego figurines and whatnot, they're a great boost to your employer brand. People will take pictures of those, post online, talk about how great their experience is with the company, which then opens the gateways to acquiring more amazing talent. So there's lots and lots of benefits. If you just want to reach out and chat about how you could potentially improve the culture and the whole atmosphere in your company, regardless of, like I said, Chocolate Soup being a solution that you'd be implementing. Again, reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. Like I said, I just want to see happy people waking up on Monday morning and really looking forward to going to work.
That's awesome. Dan, thank you so much. This is really good to be able to catch up. It's definitely been too long, so I apologize for the delay in between chatting here. But this is awesome to kind of hear where you're at. I love this. I think it's like this underappreciated area that if people just paid more attention to, there would be many better places to work at. So this is great.
100% totally agree, Nick. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and definitely looking forward to chatting again very soon.
Awesome stuff. Thanks again, Dan.
Thanks.